hello everyone online. We have two commissioners in person here. We have Greg Lave and Sean. And I think if Morgan shows up in person, preferably we'd have him run the meeting in person. But I don't see Morgan online yet, but we are in need of someone to run the meeting. Scott, I know you mentioned you were on the road, and Mayor Green was gonna have to jump out for the public hearing. So I think we're gonna have a script here in person and hard copy, and I can put a script on the screen if anyone wants to run the meeting on the screen, but essentially we're looking for someone to run the meeting. I'll take any volunteers.
I volunteer Greg.
That's what I just said.
Hey, this is Scott. I think I can run the meeting. I'm gonna log out and try to log back in on see if I can do it from my iPad so I can actually read it instead of looking at my phone. So why don't I give that a try, okay?
Okay, sounds good. We'll stand by. I'll pull up the digital script in the meantime.
Okay, cool, thanks.
And Mayor Green, could you just give me a thumbs up? Do you see the script when I put it on the screen? Just, do you see that right now? I may need to reshare. No, okay. So it's back on.
Good morning.
Okay, perfect. There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. We're getting great participation then. Thanks for being here.
Happy to be here.
Okay.
All right, Scott, if you can hear us, we're ready for you to take it away whenever you're ready. Scott, I don't know if you can hear us, but we are ready to start the meeting. Looks like you are muted. All right. Not hearing from Scott. Morgan Law, do you want to run the meeting via Zoom?
Not particularly. I mean, I could, but there's gonna be a kid explosion at my house in probably like half an hour, so.
Oh, there's Scott.
There we go.
Okay, I'm back.
There.
I'm gonna try to run it from my phone. It's pretty tiny, so if you like, I can begin if you put up, whatever we need to on the screen, Chapin.
Okay, good deal. And can you see the agenda on the screen?
Yep, I can see the agenda on the screen. So, um, tonight I'd like to start the City of Leadville Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting on June 12th, 2024. Original start time is 6 p.m. I'd like to do a roll call.
Roll call. Mayor Green,
Here.
Commissioner Bauer,
Here.
Commissioner Ducharme,
Here.
Commissioner Law,
Here.
Commissioner Denise,
Here.
Commissioner Lobby,
Here.
alternate Commissioner Wardson,
Here.
and we have
Oh, all right then. Moving along. Are there any revisions to the agenda this evening?
staff does not have any questions.
Okay. Hearing none. Like to go to approve the agenda. And then let's move on to.
Lobby moves to approve the agenda.
Second.
Hearing that approved, moving on to approval of the minutes.
And there are partially completed minutes in your packet. Just wanted to show you that we are making progress, but they're not finalized, not ready for your approval tonight. Let us know if you have any comments on what the minutes that are in there, but we hope to at the next meeting have fully completed minutes from that meeting.
I do have
Okay.
a comment. I think that it's my opinion, that we're going into way too much detail in the minutes. We're actually giving a word by word recap of a meeting, and that's what recordings are for.
Right.
And I just don't feel like the same was true of the HPC. It was pages of minutes, and it, in my mind at least, and it doesn't feel like that's necessary.
I think staff I would agree. The purpose of the minutes is really to capture discussion items from the commissioners and questions, particularly regarding public hearing items. It's not to capture, anything that staff presented that's already in the staff report. That's definitely been communicated to those who are typing the HPC minutes and also those who are just starting to type the P and Z minutes. I didn't have a chance to review these P and Z minutes, but I agree that staff,
I think it will take a lot of burden off of them.
Absolutely.
Minutes should be 1.5 pages.
Yeah. The staff member who's been typing HPC minutes feels very committed to capturing those in order. I think obviously that, we have a new member in that position now, so I think that's gonna be changing.
Okay.
And I think we're just gonna be try to be consistent with that also P and Z, so I agree, I support that.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, we can move on, Scott.
Okay, then, let's see here. Moving on to public comment, things that are not on the agenda.
And we have one member of the public, please come on up, Steve.
Okay, my name is Steve Prestash, it's two there. And I have several issues that seem to be dovetailing into one concern. My recollection of a New Yorker magazine article, in part, was that the legal standing of trees and landscape features such as waterways and as streams don't become established until it's granted by some legislative body. So we have a legal standing, the surrounding area here that is under the county review, but our ATV traffic is disturbing that and chewing that up. But more focused or different focuses, disenchanted franchise groups of people gain standing only after a long period. We can look at this as the empowerment of Black people, women, sort of work. I just can't think of the right word. And gay people. And they've established standing now, but another facet of this standing issue is people that have standing in forums and on government bodies. When we begin to see that they gain benefits from being on these things that affect their industry directly, then we can see that maybe it's time for us to address their ability of their standing at these meetings and issues. That's about all I've written here, so thank you kindly for listening. I'll keep working on these issues.
Steve. Any other comments, public comments? About the,
Come up, step up to the,
if you have a public comment on the freight item, we'll have time for that later. That's this was a good opportunity for like any general comments. All right, no more public comments in, council chambers. Got it.
you still muted.
Moving on to general updates.
Right, I'll keep this short and sweet. Just want to congratulate, former commissioner, Kathy Buller, for reappointment to a regular planning and zoning commissioner, position that was, passed by the mayor with the city council on June 4th, last city council meeting. And, so that'll be for an additional six-year term. And then I'll move on to the comprehensive plan update. So I've had 3 meetings with the Lake County Community Planning and Development Department and a group called Community Builders. It's a 501c3 organization, a nonprofit. And I think where we are at is that we just try to go very slowly and see if kind of what the city's role in this might be. And what originally the county had reached out to this group, conducted a workshop earlier this year with the original intent on just doing some pre-comprehensive plan work to make sure that everything was aligned for the work that the county would do, the interim update in 2025. Long story short, the county has invited the city and community builders, this nonprofit group has invited the city to participate this in more than just in more than just as a stakeholder with potential for the city to join forces with the county on and community builders and comprehensive plan update. And so I've already mentioned this at former planning and zoning commission meetings. Kind of where we're at with this right now is I've asked the community builders in the county to submit some one-pagers kind of explaining pros and cons, why the city should participate kind of in this. And next steps on that would be bringing that to city council, providing that information to city council. So city council can provide some direction to staff on how to proceed, but I'm optimistic, excited about the opportunity for this. There's lots of consideration. One of the pros on this is working with a nonprofit group. You know, we don't have to put in an RFP for consultants. Nonprofit group can also receive grant funding and from the state, like particularly organizations like DOLA, Department of Local Affairs. And it's an opportunity for the city to leverage some funds that are currently not budgeted for in the 2024 budget. That will also need to be budgeted for the 2025 budget. And then it gives us flexibility in terms of our financial commitment to that. If we were to go out and pay a consulting firm, you know, we're probably looking around $125,000-$150,000 for a consulting firm. You know, comprehensive plans are land use heavy, but it's not exclusive to land use. And so the example I use is like childcare. Childcare is important, would be an important component of the 2025 comp plan update that would not necessarily be related to land use. So it'd be, you know, it's a citywide comprehensive planning effort. And so one of the pros of this gives us an opportunity to be flexible in how we would fund this. So in other words, we could work with the county and the nonprofit on obtaining grant funds. So for example, we may have a commitment, financial commitment that may not be required this year. It could be the last payment for this project. So we could get a lot of work done in 2024, wouldn't necessarily have to pay for it potentially until like the end of 2025. So all that is TBD, but those are some potential considerations for, why we might want to work with community builders and an update. So I'm gonna be, I'm gathering all this information right now, and I'll be presenting it to city council here in the coming month or two.
Are we thinking this is an update, or are we thinking more like along the line of a major revision? What are you thinking?
I would say update.
Then why are you thinking the cost would be so high?
Well, I think if you were, that is the cost for an update for a, major update for for a consulting firm. It really just depends on the scope of the work, and, you know, staff can't necessarily determine exactly the scope of the update. You know, that is really more of a city council and a community decision once you're opening up of that plan. So the scope is, you know, we want to define that going into a project, but it can also be, you know, a little bit open-ended because, there may be things that through the public engagement process that are determined that should be a part of the comprehensive plan that weren't initially anticipated.
Sure.
Point of order.
Does the city's fiscal year run on the calendar year?
Yes.
And is Gabby going to be our chair still?
Since she's not here, I think that goes without saying.
So,
I just wondered because of the way you said regular.
so on chair appointment, we should have that on the future agenda,
Okay,
appointment, chair and vice chair.
Mhm.
Take any questions on that, that concludes my staff updates or general updates. And, there is a number of the public who would like to make a comment on point of order. I'll leave that to you, Scott.
You're still muted, Scott.
Sorry, getting used to all this here. Is there anybody in the public that wants to comment on this?
Thank you,
Is that-
it's 9 right now. My name is Steve Prestash again. I had involvement with the comprehensive plan last time, the city plan, because of incredible adverse reactions by the city against my personal and business interests. Ongoing and at the past, if I vaguely recall. When I examined the comprehensive plan that the city generated, there's a curious thing in Colorado law that shalls are mandatory. And a lot of shalls were not completed. But another curious thing is, if no one raises an objection within 30 days, that is court file. Then it's okay. So a lot of shalls are not completed. I filed a complaint in the district court. And I think I amended the complaint, and it had a considerable amount of failures of not fulfilling the comprehensive plan. And then it has gone by a few seconds ago. So, you know, looking at this, I don't think, and also the previous administration was interested in evidence that I saw, including a book that was in the mayor's office that said combining city and county governments. In combining city and county governments, I think this just is not what a lot of people want. And I see this working with the county to come up with a comprehensive plan on however level is achieved, there. I don't see why the city cannot complete its own comprehensive plan without hiring, someone for 100,000 to 150,000, some group to do that. Okay, 2 minutes of things. I think it's a relatively straightforward process. The only thing you would need to spend would be maybe $5,000 or $7,000 on a lawyer to review what was completed and what was done. So, I'd like to, I agree with some of what Chapin says, but I think that the city comprehensive plan should be the city comprehensive plan, in no way dovetailed or complementary or a subset of the county. I'd like to start a committee or something to look into this, and the main thing is getting polling the community, and you can do that with trained volunteers. The rest of it, I don't see as being that. Thank you kindly.
Thanks, Steve, for your input. Really appreciated. Let's see here. We're going to move on to new business with the freight boxcars conditional use permit. Amendment.
I'll put a script on the screen for you, just one second. I'm gonna do a couple Zoom controls here to stop sharing and reshare.
Sounds good.
And as this CUP is going to appear before council next, I'm going to bow out at this time. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. All right, Scott, hopefully you are seeing my, the script with highlights.
Yep, I'm shuffling screens here, trying to drill into this. There we go. Yeah, if you just hold steady, yeah, that'd be good. Good afternoon. My name is Scott Bauer, and I am the acting chairperson of the Leadville Planning and Zoning Commission. This is a public hearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission to consider the conditional use permit application by Dan and Dave Anderson, Freight 910 LLC, requesting a conditional use permit for the installation of 2 boxcars at the property known as 320 East 9th Street. I'm trying to get this. Thank you. When the public hearing is open, I will first attend to some preliminary housekeeping matters. I will then ask for staff to discuss the highlights of the staff report, followed by the applicant to make a brief presentation of his or her proposal, followed by public comments from members of the public in attendance. The applicant will have an opportunity for rebuttal, which is the applicant's opportunity to respond to any comments made by members of the public. After the rebuttal, I will close the public comment portion of the public hearing and allow the commissioners an opportunity to ask questions of the applicant and staff. Once the public comment portion of the hearing is closed, we will not accept additional public comments unless it is in response to questions posed by the commission with the applicant. Staff will have an opportunity for clarification rebuttal, which is staff's opportunity to respond to any comments made by the applicant or members of the public. At the conclusion of our questions, the Planning and Zoning Commission will deliberate and render a recommendation to City Council or decide to continue the hearing. A recommendation will be forwarded to City Council for a public hearing. City Council will make a decision on June 18th, 2024 at 6 p.m. during the regular City Council meeting. This public hearing is a quasi-judicial, which means that we have to follow certain procedural requirements to establish a record. For this reason, it is important that when you speak, you identify yourself and your physical address. Are there any questions about the public hearing procedure? Hearing none. It's going to notice and posting requirements. A notice of this hearing is required to be published in the newspaper at least 15 days prior to tonight's meeting. In addition, the property must be posted and notification to all property owners within 200 feet of the property must be sent. Mr. LaChance, have these requirements been satisfied?
Yes, they have.
Evidence of notice is hereby made a part of the record, as are the applicant materials, the Leadville zoning ordinance, the Secretary of Interior standards for treatment of historic properties, any correspondence received prior to the published deadline and in the course of tonight's hearing, and any other documents, photographs, or other materials introduced at the hearing. I will now open the public hearing for 320 East 10th Street, conditional use permit for installation of 2 boxcars, applicant Nan and Dave Anderson, Freight 910 LLC. At this time, I ask the Planning and Zoning Commission to disclose any ex parte communication or conflict of interest with the applicants. Will staff please present staff report highlights? Hearing none. Yep.
All right. Maybe 1 second, I'll just reshare the plans, put these on the screen so that everyone can see them. All right, good evening, commissioners and members of the public, so before the Zoom participants and for the record, my name is Chapin LaChance, I'm the planning director for the city of Leadville. And so I'm the staff member evaluating this application. This is an application for a conditional use permit amendment to a project for a site that already received a conditional use permit in 2019. So the proposed scope of work is the installation of 2 boxcars on the property. And I'll get into kind of why this requires a conditional use permit here in a little bit. But this is essentially the expansion of the existing commercial use. The 2 proposed boxcars are proposed to be used for really the 2 uses that are on the property. 1 boxcar is proposed to be used for a check-in office for the residential lodging property, which is really the northern portion of the property. And then the other boxcar, the 7th boxcar, is proposed to be used for a variety of kind of a flexible space for a variety of uses for the event center use that exists on the property. In addition, there are some other minor portions of work, scope of work that would be proposed. So bathroom addition, accessible ramps, installation of a deck, and additional parking. It's important to note that this application is one of 3 applications that have been submitted to the city concurrently. So in addition to this CUP application, we also have a COA, certificate of appropriateness application that has been submitted. That was reviewed by Historic Preservation Commission at last night's meeting. That recommendation will also go to City Council. There was a recommendation last night for approval from the HPC. And then the 3rd application is there's an administrative lot consolidation application that has been submitted. This property has numerous historic lots that are proposed to be consolidated into one property with this application or with that lot consolidation plat. The applicants are Nan and Dave Anderson. You know them personally. They're here in attendance tonight. This property is zoned TR, so it's your traditional residential and retail zoning district. So it allows for a mix of uses as long as those uses between residential and commercial are compatible. Just in terms of the existing site, I'm gonna try not to leave this image on the screen and sorry, actually I was going for this one. Leave this on the screen for most of this report, so I'm not flipping around on you too much, but really the context and conditions of this site include, you know, this is definitely a rail use has been existed on this property historically, both with the switch line that went through the property and the existing, you know, train tracks that are adjacent to the property to the east. You know, this site extends, you know, basically full blocks. It's bounded by streets or rail in all directions, kind of with the exception of a corner lot and the St. Vincent condominium property. There are 3 parking lots on the property, so two paved parking lots north and south, and then access of 9th and 10th streets, and then there's a unpaved parking lot off of Hemlock Street. So there were 13 individual lodging cabins approved with that 2019 CUP on the northern part of the property, in addition to, of course, the historic freight depot that's been rehabilitated into an event center. I can put on your screen a couple of the excerpts from previous plans that were approved that are valuable to discuss. So first, in your packet, you'll see image 3, which shows the 2018 parking plan that was approved. The history on this is essentially the city council in 2018 lowered the parking requirements for the property from 71 spaces to 58 spaces. The code does allow the planning commission to make a recommendation to city council to waive some or all the parking requirements. So that did happen. Planning commission made that recommendation. The city council authorized a reduction in the parking requirements. So again, that's to 58 spaces. And that was essentially a temporary, this was a temporary parking plan until the language in the approval letter, until the next phases of the project are submitted and new considerations will be made. So that shown on your screen was the 2018 parking plan. And then below that is an excerpt from the 2019 conditional use permit site plan that was approved. And you can see that there's we'll talk about this thing, there's a vegetative barrier that was approved and required basically between this site and Old St. Vincent condominiums, and that's along the Star Mission. And then if we look at the current site plan on the property, I just want to note that there is if anyone's wondering what this triangle is, the applicants provide some background information on this. But long story short, this is BLM land ownership. It's just a sliver of federal property that extends into this site. And then we can look at the survey, which has been provided by the applicant, and this is from 2018. And this survey shows the multiple lots that are on the property, including plat rights of way, et cetera. And these, all of these are proposed to be consolidated into one property through that administrative lot consolidation application that's been currently submitted. The benefit of that to the applicant selling the lots is that right now there are internal lot lines. So for additional structures in the future, this allows those proposed site plans to fully comply with any kind of internal setback requirements. So essentially, there would be no internal lot lines that would prevent development of additional structures within the property. And so the only side setback line would be along with the perimeter boundary. All right, so I will leave. Sorry, I'll go back to this page. So that's just some background on the property, just kind of helping to narrate. I should mention that in the 2019 conditional use permit, allowed 13 cabins and 10 future additional cabins for a total of 23 cabins on the property. So you can see on the site plan those 13 cabins. There were two conditions of approval that we'll talk about tonight with that 2019 CUP. One was that the parking lots off of Hemlock Street, the language was be completed this summer, in summer of 2019. There was not any kind of specification for whether those parking lots need to be paved. So obviously, since 2019, those parking lots have, are now accessible off of Hemlock Street. Although, of course, they're not paved, and that was not specified in the condition. The other was a vegetative barrier was required to be installed that summer between this property and St. Vincent condos. And we'll talk about that later. Essentially, why a conditional use permit here is being required is that both the existing entertainment venue, event center, and the lodging use, both of those are supposed to be expanded. Currently in the code, both of those uses require a conditional use permit. So staff assumes that the event center was a by right use at the time it was approved. Obviously, the lodging required a conditional use permit, so this is an amendment to the previous CUP for the lodging, and basically they're requiring a CUP for expansion of that event center use, which was probably previously by right. All right, moving on to criteria. So in your code, in your staff report, you have several criteria for approval of conditional use permits. The first is that it meets the zoning requirements. So in your staff report, just evaluated everything like setbacks, building heights, lot coverage, et cetera. Really, the only thing the main thing to pay attention to is regarding setbacks. And I will try to zoom in here to this has been updated to today from what is in your packet. So just follow along with me on the screen. But it's the other ones. Thanks, Dave, for that. Zoom in here. So the northernmost boxcar is proposed 3 feet from the westernmost property line that's shared with St. Vincent condominiums. And that meets the minimum required, in our zoning code of 3 foot side yard setback. Staff has included a condition of approval that lot consolidation plat be recorded, so technically there's not any internal lot lines that would not be complying with the setback requirements. The applicants are submitted that. Alright, moving on to parking requirements. Alright, so as I mentioned, city council previously authorized in 2018 a parking requirement of 58 spaces. And Dave, thanks for all your updates and all the work that you've done to get the site plan accurate. So right now, the proposed site plan specifies 39 paved parking spaces, which would be existing, and 39 unpaved parking spaces existing. So that's a total of 78 parking spaces, and I had that listed correctly in your staff report. So a total of 78, previous parking requirement was 58. All right, so that's different. Yes, so, so there, in other words, there are currently 20 spaces over what was required, so that's good. With the proposed boxcars, the northernmost boxcar, staff finds that it's exempt from any additional parking requirement. So it's habitable floor area, require a building permit, so there's square footage associated with it, but for lodging use, parking requirements are just based on the number of units. So there's not a parking requirement for that northernmost boxcar. The southernmost boxcar, which would be used for a variety of uses, but all of those uses would be in the code. The parking requirements are based on the floor area. The floor area is approximately in a boxcar, one of the boxcars is approximately 370 square feet. The closest category we have in our code for that would be related to this would be auditoriums and public assembly facilities. That's the closest thing. Those require 2 spaces per 100 square feet in the code. So if you do the math, that results in a parking requirement of 7.4 spaces for the boxcar. And there's a floor plan that's included in your packet that shows if the boxcar was used for example, restaurant or bar use, tables and chairs, etc. You can see the seating there. So that rounds up to 8 spaces. So I guess the most restrictive interpretation of this is that there are 8 additional spaces that are required. In addition to the 58 spaces that were required by the council in 2018, so that would result in 66 spaces. So I think everyone's on the same page about that. Now, the question is about paving. So the council's approval letter did not specify any information about a paved parking requirement. Obviously, the applicant has 2 paved parking lots. In the code, any new additional parking spaces that are required for any kind of expansion of structures or uses, those spaces you're required to come into conformance, and those spaces are required to be paved. So I think maybe the commission might be kind of starting to see the question that I'm trying to frame, is that considering, so they definitely need to have 8 paved parking spaces, which they do, existing. But does that need to be in addition to the paved parking spaces that are already there, which were not specified to be paved with the council's 2018 approval? So that is the question that I have tonight. I'll maybe let the commission chew on that. But what I have in your packet is a draft condition of approval that, again, this is with the most restrictive interpretation of this, that would require 8 additional paved parking spaces other than what's already proposed. Now I certainly think it would be reasonable for the commission to also say, well, council didn't require parking spaces to be they didn't specify the parking spaces to be paved with their 2018 approval. So 8 new spaces need to be paved. Yes, there's already 58 that are paved, or 39. Any questions on that? Okay, moving on. sorry, 1 second here, I'll look at my notes. So I think that is probably one of the main discussion points. The next criteria is regarding, just compliance with the comprehensive plan. So in your staff report, noting that the comprehensive plan does talk about this area, the town site mixed use area, that's how this is designated on the comprehensive plan. It says, it does address part, it says that, traffic intensive uses, provide adequate parking and landscaping. So we just talked about parking, so I don't think I need to go into that more, but I just want to note that the comprehensive plan does call out the importance of parking in this area. For most of the remainder of the criteria, I think I could just summarize by saying staff is finding that the proposal complies. Considering the conditions of approval that we're discussed, because the addition of the boxcars is a continuation of the previously approved uses. So it's fairly simple, but really important because that's how it basically finally complies with the rest of the CUP criteria, amendment criteria. Okay, and then the last thing that I want to discuss is regarding the star ditch. And I don't want to try and overcomplicate this, but I definitely want to talk about the different layers here, so that the commission can offer any feedback. But essentially, the star ditch is a historic drainage feature that brought water into the city of Leadville, particularly for industrial purposes, went all the way down to the St. Louis smelting and refining operation for industrial uses and like including cooling. And if the applicant has provided an excerpt from a Sanborn map, and we discussed this last night at HPC, that shows the star ditch on the property, in the 1800s, and it exists today. And it's adjacency to the railroad tracks. So I think there are several layers here. One is just kind of the historic star ditch. The other is that in terms of ownership, the star ditch was a placer, the star placer, that is shown on a 1962 North Leadville Edition subdivision plat that extends into this property. So in terms of property ownership, the has a survey which I showed on the screen, and the survey does not call out anything in terms of some other drainage easement or any other type of property ownership that would encumber this property. So staff is fairly confident that there is the star ditch is not any kind of easement that crosses onto this property. And I put the survey on the screen so you can see that that it's not showing. So I believe the applicant owns the star ditch, and that's fairly non-negotiable. Now, really, the other layer of this is environmental. So the water, historically, this was a drainage ditch that came through the property, and today does collect some residual water that comes from the east, drains on the property, and then drains to the south. The boxcars are the portions of the boxcars are proposed over top of the ditch. So one is actually just a deck, and the other is an actual boxcar. So we're thinking, okay, we have a structured habitable floor area or a building permit that's over top of a drainage feature, and so there's definitely going to be airspace underneath. So I've added the condition of approval in your packet, and I think this is really the most permissive way to deal with this. That this project be approved with the condition that the city's consulting civil engineer, who's RG Associates, who's really the qualified expert in terms of everything environmental and drainage law, basically issue a letter of approval approving the installation of boxcars over the star ditch, which I believe at a minimum is essentially an on-site drainage feature, an on-site drainage ditch. So I'd like the commission to consider that condition of approval. In your staff report, I've gone into a little bit further detail regarding the fact that this is not an operable unit of the EPA. Superfund site, the Star Ditch, the southern portions of the Star Ditch in the city, like that drain into the Community Justice Center. Those are part of the operable, an operable unit with, the California Gold Superfund site, but it does not apply here. That I do not believe this is like US Army Corps of Engineers jurisdiction, because this is not any kind of perennial, or like intermittent waterway, or stream, it is a drainage ditch. And the other part of this, excuse me, that's not in your staff, that is important for the context of this, is that water coming through this ditch, I think it does occur in bigger drainage events. But upstream of this, you don't have to go very far to get the intersection of 12th Street and County Road 6, I believe. Is it 8? 8, sorry. And so that's just east of the rail yard property. Just recently, multiple engineers have identified that the historic drainage area that drained snow melt from the east side into the Star Ditch. Most of that drainage currently, as of today, enters the 12th Street ditch and runs west. So 12th Street essentially forms a dam, for lack of a better word, that diverts a lot of that historic drainage that came through the Star Ditch and into town, and diverts that now west in city jurisdiction in a 12th Street ditch. So I believe that that makes me feel better about stormwater coming through this property. But again, I have a condition of approval that the city engineer, who's more qualified regarding drainage law, to approve this. So that will allow the PNC to kind of put that responsibility on the city engineer. That is my best analysis they've been able to do with this, that ditch in the past week or so. Any questions on that?
Yeah, I've got a bunch.
I do too.
No, you go first, Tim.
Well, should we ask, like, should we discuss right now or should we wait until later?
We probably should wait until we're in deliberation and have a discussion.
Okay, maybe take any clarifying questions, but then discuss the deliberation.
I was just wondering how that ditch did. When was that big flood? 2 years ago, last year?
Yeah.
Was that historic rain? So that's a question I had.
Yeah, and I do have photos and videos of that, 'cause I was up that 12th Street and County Road 8 intersection, and most of that water is going into the 12th Street ditch. I did have an station, closer to this property in the ditch. All right, so I'll just wrap up here. So, in your packet, the last page of the staff report, you'll see a recommendation that the P and Z recommends for approval to the city council with the attached findings and conditions. And because there are several findings and conditions that are recommended, I'll just put those findings and conditions on screen. And they are right here. So just to recap, so that basically those two other applications that are currently pending, there's currently that those get approved, the COA and the lot consolidation. And then that those two conditions of approval from the previous city council. The parking lot is already, the unpaved parking lot is already there off of Hemlock Street. But the applicant has acknowledged that there needs to be a vegetation barrier between the freight property and St. Vincent condos, as was approved by city council in 2019. And that, this is the one that I have a question about 66 paved parking spaces. Or P and Z wants to make a recommendation for those to be 8 paid parking spaces or anything in between. And then lastly, what I just mentioned about the city engineers approval for essentially structures over top of the Star Ditch. Thank you.
All right, then, in terms of deliberations, I'm having difficulty seeing anybody on, like, from my Zoom screen here. So I may need some assistance if people need to raise hands, or how best to do that, Chapin.
Yeah, I can help you out, Scott, if you just want to open it up for questions for staff.
Yeah, that sounds great. So any commissioners who want to commence the question?
At this time, I'd like to ask, have you engaged the city engineer? And do you have a time frame in which an analysis of the startage will take place?
The answer is, no, I'm pretty sure. I have to pay the engineer $200 and some an hour. And I would, prefer to wait until after, to make sure that P and Z, HPC, city council does not have any other concerns with any other parts of the project before I pay them, that amount of money to evaluate this very technical part of the application. I think that would probably take them less than a week.
Also, you didn't refer to city code in terms of the ditch and drainage in the city. Do you have, did you look at that or did you have a thought of that?
There's, the city code makes a reference to Denver, stormwater manual. Which I'm not trained on, that was pretty, when we get there, that's really
Yeah.
the engineer.
It's my understanding, because we have drainage all the time.
Yeah.
That you can't change drainage.
Yeah, if you can't increase basically the intensity, so basically like your volume, your CFS onto another property, the location onto another property, that would affect in an adverse way. That's where I should stop with drainage law. But that's where the engineer comes in.
I think that may be enough, because we have drainage all over town that runs through private property. And the private property may not modify that drainage.
I think that's an excellent point. So in other words, the applicant, it would be my interpretation, that the applicant is not increasing the flow or changing the direction of flow on downstream property.
So
So Chief, just to be clear from my side, it's a little garbled, but so there is no change to the drainage. There is no drainage issue with this project per se. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say there's definitely not a change proposed, in terms of, direction or volume, from this project. The applicant, I think is specified in their application that there would be some minor adjustment to the star ditch that I believe is, fully within their right, some minor grading. But we're talking about a foot or two of alignment, but nothing that would affect downstream properties.
Hey, Chapin, this is Morgan. Sorry, can you just elaborate on the condition, approval with condition with the city engineer and like what that would that impact like timeline or cost or process?
And so basically I'm recommending a condition of approval so that, I guess, best case scenario for the applicant, if P and Z were to, city council were to, approve, next week, basically immediately after, I will refer this to the city engineer, say, city engineer, I'm identifying multiple layers that I'd like for you to consider. In terms of the historic drainage, alignment, the property ownership with the start, placer shown on the 1962 plat. Any kind of federal jurisdiction, in terms of Army Corps of Engineers, et cetera, so I handed out. And also anything regarding drainage law, like we just talked about, increasing flow to, or modifying flow to downstream properties. And so the engineers would be more qualified than I am on all of those things. And then I would just essentially request an email or a one-page letter from the engineer, with their decision. And then that would be that's a condition prior to issuance of a building permit. So, I mean, that in theory, that could happen next week, and then the applicant could submit for a building permit the following week if the engineer does not identify any issues or anything that can't be addressed with their own conditional conditions. I didn't mean to say that twice.
I have a clarifying question about parking.
Yeah.
I don't have it printed in front of me. I have your notes, but just say for me again, how many spots already exist?
78,
Okay,
39 are paved, so 39 are paved, 39 are unpaved. So that's plus 20 over the council's requirement.
okay. I think I had it backwards in my- from what the first CUP. lowered in requirement.
Hey, this is Scott. I, yeah, I guess my question was for Chapin, like we're moving towards like parking being paved. Is that like bringing things into compliance? Is that my understanding, or is that? I wonder where do we lie with that, like within the code currently?
Sure, so. I think if you're looking at historical properties, maybe I'll just use an analogy here. If you have a historic building on Harrison Avenue. Generally speaking, if you're making modifications to that building, if you're doing an addition, if you're changing a use of the portion of the building. You know, like the building code is gonna want you to update the building to be compliant with code for the scope of work that you are modifying. There's not going to be an expectation, so you know, in other words, there's a code for existing buildings, right? So there's not an expectation that you're meeting the same code for brand new construction of a building. So that is, you know, that's really gonna be the general intent of the zoning code and the off-street parking code in terms of legal non-conforming uses coming into compliance with current codes. So we're going to kind of establish a baseline for where you're at today, and then for anything that you're adding onto on top of that baseline, that addition needs to come into compliance. But there's not an expectation to go backwards and bring the entire project into compliance. So in line with that, I guess with that methodology, that's why staff is recommending that based on the city council's approval from 2018 for 58 spaces, that only the additional floor area of 370 square feet for one box needs to meet the additional parking requirements of the current code, which is 8 additional spaces. So taking 58 from 2018, adding 8 for the boxcars floor area for a total of 66 spaces. But the question for the P and Z is, how does the P and Z see that paving requirement? Considering that the 2018 council approval did not specify paving.
Okay, thank you.
I want to ask a question that maybe you all can speak to when it's your time to answer, which is in an unpaved parking lot, I'm wondering if you notice at all, because the spots aren't painted, if you're able to actually get as many cars parked as. Okay, I've been there when it's full, and I guess I'm just wondering.
Like not even blocks. Right. Down the street.
That, we need to stop that right now.
So
Yeah.
I'm not really asking
But-
about, I'm just wondering, like, you know. Do people park in a way where they're just like kind of spread out and not actually filling all, I think your note here says maybe 17 and 15 spots, you know what I'm saying? Like, if people don't have a spot to pull into, they can park wider apart than a normal parking space.
Right.
And I guess I'm just thinking about what benefit it might serve to have those actual lines marked versus what you're actually seeing happening in real life. So.
I think it's a good question. We're in the, as Commissioner Deschamps mentioned, we're in the portion of the public hearing for just for questions for staff. So I would say that, that staff hasn't evaluated, prior to this application, how that is occurring. I would say, staff's comment on that would be that, obviously with a paved parking situation, striping can occur, obviously, and stay, but there, even with an unpaved parking lot, there are ways to designate parking spaces, other than just striping. So that, that's certainly a consideration. And then, I think the other consideration here is, the parking code was, I think it was last updated in 2003, and I don't have any record of what was actually updated in that parking code. Generally speaking, in the playing field, and, in municipalities, parking is kind of going in, different directions in different places. It's certainly more of a, suburban, concept, to require a lot of parking for like residential uses, for example. in like downtown environments, definitely kind of this pro housing area that we're in. A lot of communities are trying to sever parking requirements from uses like residential uses, and that's starting to roll into mixed use neighborhoods. So, if you go back and look at the intent if you look at the comprehensive plan and how this area is designated, it says that adequate parking needs to be provided. And so, to the extent that how the designation of those parking spaces or to the paving of those parking spaces, that's not gonna be addressed in the comprehensive plan. That's really just gonna be addressed in the parking code. And I think that there's a lot of precedent out there for not going back in the past and requiring existing uses to come into compliance, but requiring expansion of those uses going forward to be in compliance. That's probably the best response that I can give. Other than that, I would just say, pose that question to the applicant during their time to ask questions or answer questions.
Right, Chief and Scott here, in terms of procedure, where are we at here? Have we,
Yes. Yeah, sorry, I'll put this because you don't have a digital script in front of you. So, next step would be to open this up to the applicant's presentation. And then after that, you can ask questions of the applicant.
okay, that sounds great, unless there's anybody else that wants to deliberate anything at this point. Hearing none, we're moving on. So yeah, if you could put that up on the screen, that'd be great.
Yep, and you want me to just use the plans that you submitted already on the screen?
You can, but we brought two others and they address the same things you've already addressed. We'll just hit them first and then go on. So.
Yeah, you can expand that.
Okay, and just zoom in.
Yeah.
That's this one and the next one.
Okay. Feel free, maybe just a little bit closer to either the podium or just your chair.
Let's set it up this way so that everybody else can see it as well. You've already seen this, David. If we set up this way, would this work?
Yeah, I would say maybe the closest to the camera, because that's actually right there, the camera pulls in, just.
But you've got it up on the.
Yeah, you've got most of it up on the screen, yeah. But
So Nan and Dave Anderson, 320 East 9th Street. And thank you, commissioners, for hanging in here with us. As Chapin pointed out, I'll talk about a little bit about the kind of the background for why we move these box cars to the site and what our intention is. And then we can get into the parking issues for sure. So currently, the way this lumberyard, the lodging functions, those 13 cabins, people either get a text and they can go right into their cabins, or they have to come to Freight, the depot, pick up a key and then drive back around. So and go to the parking lot associated with the lumberyard and then into their cabin. So what we're trying to do is kind of reduce that amount of traffic around the site by providing the check-in directly associated with the lodging. The other boxcar is really going to help us in those times when we're setting up for an event or we've got something going on in the main depot, and yet people either staying at the lumberyard or even associated with the event still want a place to be. So whether they're picking up a coffee or it's a meeting breakout room or whatever, that's what that lower, the southernmost boxcar function will be. It will also help kind of enclose the courtyard associated with Freight so that when we have an outdoor event, we really have a little better control. Now, to parking, as Chapin mentioned, we have a total of 78, so 20 more than we were originally required to provide. We were not required to provide any paving. However, last summer we did pave both those 13 sites associated with the lumberyard and 26 down associated with Freight. The west, getting to your question, Commissioner Ducharme. The west parking lot, which we did gravel back in 2018, so that it would function evenly as a parking lot. Every summer, we put down 39 timbers that designate exactly where people should park. And when they use the parking lot, they are very compliant with lining up with those timbers. So it's just like having a curbs. In the winter, we do take those away because we can't plow the parking lot with the timbers there. So whether it's snow covering up the parking lot or whatever, painting stripes pretty much go away in the winter. So we feel that the timbers serve that purpose. And it actually helps, particularly in the summer when we tend to have our bigger events, bigger crowds.
We do, and it's not very permanent, come out with, chalking paint to designate those spaces down in the gravel. We do it about every 5 or 6 weeks, and it's hard to find them, but we still put down the paint because it really does help people understand where they go. So the timbers are the best.
And then if I can speak to the paving versus not paving, what we have found in our 5 years of operation is that it made sense to pave those 2 parking lots because they get the most use. And it's easier to plow a paved parking lot. The west parking lot, however, drains really well. And that's where I would say it's really a benefit to the city not pave every single parking lot, even if it's a requirement, because it has to do with water quality, it has to do with sustainability, it has to do with what else can grow there as opposed to just, asphalting over things. So we feel that for the site, having the non-paved gravel parking lot in addition to the 39 spaces that are paved really kind of works well, both for environmental purposes as well as functionality. Yeah. That's it.
Well, yeah, well, a couple other things we wanted to point out is Jacob mentioned that we would be, at that over the ditch at the south. At the south one, and in reality, what we really have is we have a couple of bridges over the deck. The ditch so that we can access the restroom, servicing up to the stage and a stair, but the deck itself is actually going to parallel that ditch along that area as parallel as you can be with a wood gravel edge.
Just for the Zoom purposes, so this is approximately where I have my mouse here.
Right, the original showed it actually going over the ditch. But we found that we'd rather keep it back. So we shrunk that a little bit and just have a couple of leaps over it. But the one at the north end, we are actually straddling the ditch with the boxcar. And in that case, we would put piers down, just concrete piers to support the wheels of the train. And that allows us to still have about 3.5 to 4 feet of clearance through that zone. And the ditches across the street and across the culverts across the street and the fire lane are all only 2 foot diameter. So we're maintaining as much flow as we can through there anyway, even if we put the piers on each side. And we recognize, and you pointed out, shaping with the whole vegetation fencing and so forth, that the first one didn't work.
Mea culpa. I planted those red twig willows to comply with the requirement in 2018, thinking that they would really take off in the ditch where there should be water, but there's never water. So those red twig willows never really grew very much. So we will redouble our efforts with this project, and we will purchase more mature red twig willows and we will water them more frequently.
Part of that was the variations on Chapin's layering scheme of the ditch and what's happened over time with that ditch because of the 2019 flood or event where we shunted it all down the 12th Street ditch. And then, of course, the one 2 years ago, or last year, whenever it was, when a lot of flow came down 11th Street. And it just came down the street, it sheeted down the street and found the ditch and wandered down the ditch. But it wasn't directed there, it just found it. And that's kind of how our whole property goes. It's kind of an edge to the sheet flow. So we're not changing that, but we have less water in it now, so we're gonna have to water those plants a little better, get them in, make sure they're mature. Right, so I think that was everything we had. If there are other questions, we're willing to talk about.
Hey, this is Scott. I did have a question for either one of you. I guess it was in regards to public notice. I wondered if you received any public notice from surrounding neighbors regarding this project.
We did not.
In the public notice, the public notice directs citizens to send that comment to me so that I can provide it to commission and council. And staff did not receive any written public comments or any verbal public comments in advance of the meeting. And we do have members of the public in attendance tonight. While I have the floor, I'm gonna run upstairs to my office and grab a laptop chair because I've got 10% meeting.
I've got one, but I wouldn't take yours.
Scott, the next step in the meeting is opening the public comment portion of the public hearing and taking public comment.
Okay. All right then. Are there any other questions from the commissioners to the applicants? Are there any other questions from the commissioners to the applicants?
No,
None here.
So,
Okay. Very well. Then moving on to public comment. At this point in time, welcome any public comment. I'm going to keep remarks to 3 minutes or less. And is there anyone here that would like to speak either for
Scott,
at this point in time?
you have a member of the public who would like to speak. Come up and introduce yourself, give us your name and address, and you have 3 minutes.
Yes, sir. 300 East 9th Street, I'm Philip Hart, so I'm surrounded entirely by this project. First of all, in regards to the survey, according to your assessor, 2 of these plots aren't. That survey includes plots that aren't owned. It says the account is non-existent. And I've actually been to the assessor and talked to them about it. They pulled up the records and said, no, this is a separate lot and there is no designated owner. So I'm not sure where the just acquisition of that, it just got drawn into that red line survey, but that's not part of any of their lots. The parking has been a constant issue. I don't know if paving would really make a difference. I'm going to try to pretend to suggest that that's going to happen. So I feel better signage might be all they need for that. They do put down the timbers like they say, that's totally true. But it seems like the parking doesn't go there first. It parks all along the street, fills the street in 2 directions for 2 blocks, and then they start pulling in that. So I don't really feel like paving is gonna make that big a difference to solve that. I just feel like the people need to know that's where they go first. For these box cars, I have serious concerns about the C rating for these being inhabitable structures of any kind, rated for any use. They're considered urban blight in almost any other district. I mean, jurisdictions fight to get rid of these things because they're not safe to use. They're not safe to even have sitting. And I mean, if they want to build a full box car, you can build a safe structure that's not going to sink into the ground or fall off. But right now, wheels aren't even on. They're just sitting on timbers. And it can't be properly inspected. The structure already exists. It's rusting through. I have pictures of it. I mean, I'm not opposed to the concept of, oh, it's a full bump, really. Something that looks like. I mean, these things they're falling apart. And there's no way they can actually be certified by an inspector to be usable. I don't know how they're still standing. Almost every part of it's been stripped and replaced and not with anything that's structurally sound. So I'm concerned they're gonna tip over on the property, honestly. I mean, there's nothing supporting them except they're just sitting on some timbers. That ground was not stable. It's been a slow march off of my property for the last 100 years. That dirt is not structurally sound. There's without some serious foundation work, there's no way you can promise that car's not gonna move. Because you put the wheels back on it and it's sitting in soft dirt. It's not gonna stay there. Those are really my concerns. In terms of aesthetics, it probably goes very well with what you're doing to try and have a box type look. But those things are safe. There's no way. So, yeah, other than the parking and the confused as to how to knock it. I can't give you a lot number, it's on the site. Actually, I can't, it doesn't have one. There isn't even a description of it, it's just right there.
Bill, your time is up. I would say as a point of clarification, what we're deciding here is whether or not what they're asking, works within the context of our city code. And the safety or ability of those boxcars to be habitable, that's entirely a building department, which exists in the county. So that's not something we concern ourselves with tonight.
Well, then I guess I made whatever comments that I needed.
Great, thank you.
Great, thanks, Greg, for that clarification. Is there any other public comment?
Anybody else would like to make a public comment?
No, council chambers, Scott.
Okay, then. In terms of moving into the next phase here, then, Chapin, do we need to deliberate one more time?
Scott, back up. We have to have a motion and a second and then a vote, closing the public comment portion of the public hearing. So I move to close the public comment portion of the public hearing.
Second.
Motion passes. We're closing the public comment at this point in time.
And then, so the next step would be the applicant's rebuttal. And you're welcome to speak to the commission.
Thanks. Okay, I'll try to take point by point. So I don't know what he's talking about when it comes to the ownership issue. We have certainly been paying taxes. We certainly have a legal survey of the property. We think we're clear on the ownership, so I don't know how to respond to that. The parking, we recognize is a challenge, and we have signage and people ignore our signage, and we have stationed people during events, some of our staff, to try to help direct people. And we will continue to, in fact, just the other day, we were saying that we should put larger signage up there. Human nature being what it is, it's really difficult to get people to park around the corner when they see an open spot right next to them. So we recognize that is something that we need to continue to work on. The box cars, we are working diligently with a structural engineer. We just had our geotechnical excavation done the other day to test the soil ability to support the piers that we are proposing. We are doing this all according to Boyle, as we are architects and we want to maintain our licenses in good standing. So we will yes, they're not in great shape right now, but neither was Freight, the depot. It had a group condition that even our structural engineers told us we should never buy that building and run like hell. So because we work with wonderful engineers, we are able to put these really questionable, sometimes questionable buildings and other objects back into service to the city and others. So I think that's it.
Let me add one thing, and that is, maybe two. We're going through a simultaneous, lot consolidation process. So this one perimeter consists of 4 different lots. And we recognize that, and that's what we're trying to get rid of those lot lines, but they are all within. So we're taking care of that. As Nan pointed out, the depot was in marginal shape, but the one thing that was solid on everything was the soil that's bearing on, which has a carrying capacity, which is huge. So I think we have a problem. We're taking it down to consolidated dirt earth. Either way, we can't fix the amount of parking that we have. We're within the limits, and people will park on the street. So, like Nan said, signage is our best friend, but there's only so much you can do with it. So, thanks.
And Scott, the next step would be, for staff to provide clarification or rebuttal. I stepped out for the member of the public's comments, just on the tail end, but the only thing I can just clarify is that we have a survey that has been submitted, stamped by a licensed surveyor. So the city wholeheartedly depends upon that to provide, accurate, property line information, and that survey is based on kind of our survey. And then the other, comment, regarding stability, safety, et cetera, is you know, the commission could put a condition of approval on this application that requires a building permit be issued by Lake County if it is one is required. That condition is not necessary, and there's already multiple conditions that address prior issues of the building permit. And Commissioner Lawley was 100% correct that a building permit would, you know, if it is required, the Lake County Building Department is the appropriate jurisdiction to enforce the building code.
Great. Thank you for that clarification. We're moving on.
Next would just be questions and comments from P and Z commissioners. Any final questions or comments before someone makes a motion?
I think we should count those 6 parking spots as ones that are already paved. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, say the first part of that.
I mean, if I continue to understand the question right, I think the 6, is it 8 or 6? 8 new parking spots should be counted as ones that are already paved.
Okay.
So they don't need to pave anymore.
I would agree with that. I have some, additional thoughts on that. And it has to do with the nature of what paving everything doesn't feel to me like it's in our nature as the dumpy old mining town that we are. I mean, in reality, that's what we're talking about. That's why I fell in love with Leadville in the first place. So I don't necessarily need to see it be more modern, and there's a second thing to that. In other cities, urban planning, it used to be urban planning wanted to pave everything, concrete and pavement. And they've since learned that that's created a huge problem. And by that, we're talking about permeability of the land. And when you pave everything, all of a sudden you create water flows that were not intended. And so allowing permeability should be important. And I parked in that Hemlock parking lot. It was fine. I was able to drive out. So I think more paving is unnecessary and maybe unwise.
Yeah, I think the gravel that is down is helpful to, reduce dust, which is good. But I just don't think it's necessary to add more pavement. The other question I had was about this. I'll probably say the wrong name, but the requirement from the original CUP for the landscaping, the dead willows, are there specifications about, like what height and what density and anything about what that means?
There's nothing in our code and
Okay.
nothing specified by city council.
I will just say from the experience I have recently been going through at the place where I work in terms of fire mitigation and fire risk, which I know is lower in the middle of Leadville. I'm still thinking about that a lot, and I'm just wondering about the choice of plants that you put in and thinking about something that's fire resistant. And I recently learned that sage is a fire retardant plant. So I'm just thinking out loud about if the willows die again, hopefully they won't. But, sage is a relatively low, that's just one example, and I'm not a botanist or whatever, but, thinking about what would be multi-purpose if there's no requirements at all.
I think the
Just a
original
suggestion.
intent was viewscape and soundscape.
Sure.
And so, you could plant petunias, I guess, but they don't do anything for that. Willows might because they get pretty tall, so.
Hey, this is Scott, on Zoom. Hey, I'm not a botanist either. However, I think like putting willows in a drainage ditch, like they tend to choke out, any water source. So maybe something for consideration, because I think like with additional building that's going on the east side, we may see additional water flow perhaps into that ditch system, perhaps. Just a thought. The other thing I had a question about was that with those additional parking spaces and ADA compliance do additional places like parking spaces need to be allocated for ADA compliance, maybe out of pre-existing paved areas, or I'm just kind of curious, like, is there any factor with that involved with any of that, the parking
It's a great
issues?
question. Great question, Scott. And the Lake County Building Department will be the authority on that when they review on this, or whatever code they deem to be applicable.
Okay, great.
An accessible parking space would be, it would not be required to be additional, it could be included in the existing parking spaces in terms of meeting the city's code. The zoning parking code.
Answers my questions.
I have a comment about the survey itself. We've used Blue River before, very reputable. One of the things that a lot of people don't understand about surveys in Leadville is they're about 30% drawing lines and finding pins, and about 70% historical, anyway, they delve deeply into the history. They've done some work for the city. They've taken up to 6 months to get us like a 4-block survey because they had to really dig into the history is almost more important than the actual lines on the page itself. So I find it really interesting that the assessor's office has something that disagrees with it, but with all due respect to the assessor's office, we have a new assessor. I have a lot of faith in him. I think he's great. However, traditionally, the assessor's office has not been a reliable source of land lines and ownership. So surveys are the only way to do that. Other is I'm really surprised because, surveys show easements and ownership within a lot line. So they show nothing about the star ditch, zero. And I just find that because they do their homework, I just found that fascinating.
Speaking of the star ditch part of this, you might have covered this, I'm sorry if I missed it. The north boxcar looks like it straddles the ditch and would be on cement pillars. Is part of the requirement we have in this CUP addendum verifying like the actual stability of the land, like that is right next to the ditch? Because I just imagine that that's like, if we're talking about moving soil, probably the loosest is right next to where the water runs. Maybe I'm wrong, because I'm not an engineer or a botanist, but, but I just wonder, is that going to be assessed at all on what we're requiring?
Yeah, good question. Again, it's going back to building department, so.
Okay,
Anytime there's a structure that requires a building permit, the building official can determine to what level of detail they want to have soil information. So that can be with, so soil testing, so the applicant has already mentioned some of that information that they're working on, like geotechnical information. So it's the building department's, it is within the building code, and it is the building department's jurisdiction, and they do have some discretion to what level of detail they want information submitted and from soil engineers.
okay.
As to soil moving, and we had Phil talking about his house moving. I think the opposite is true. Leadville's on a glacial moraine. One of the reasons they got away with doing mud sill foundations in Leadville is the ground doesn't move. You know, yeah, the floor sag. I've got an 1886 house and I can attest to that. However, the house is not 145 years later is going nowhere. So I find his concern without merit.
Yeah, in general, on this property, we don't have much concern about that. It's just like with the proximity to water, like I didn't realize until you were presenting, it's literally straddling the ditch. That just makes me wonder, but geotechnical stuff sounds great.
What's next, Chapin?
All right, so the next would be someone entertaining a motion, or I guess the chair entertaining a motion.
Oh, would anybody like to make a motion regarding this matter?
I guess I would,
May I?
oh, go ahead.
Morgan, I apologize. May I clarify two things on the conditions of approval? So the landscaping requirement, I would, instead of the prior issuance of a building permit, I would just say, prior issuance of a certificate of occupancy, so that they can install box cars, and then before they get a CO, then they can come in, the final step can be installing landscaping, so they don't damage the landscaping before they do the work. And then makes them, so that would be one thing to clarify, when you make a motion, and if the motion is for approval with the conditions that are attached, clarifying that condition prior to CO to the building permit. And then also, if the consensus of the commission is regarding that the existing paved parking lots can be used to be satisfied the 8 new paved parking spaces, then I would just suggest that be changed. That would be the condition of approval regarding the 66 parking spaces, that we would basically just strike paved. Does that make sense?
I think that makes sense.
And I will put the motion.
Did Morgan have something?
Yeah, sounded like Morgan wanted to say something.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Morgan.
it was partly a question about that condition about the parking spaces. So that, I think that clarified it. I'm still, I'm trying to look through the document to see what the options, what the conditions would be.
So I've got the motion is on page 13 of the PDF of your packet, with the conditions of approval in bold on the next page, page 14 of your packet.
I guess I don't know if this is like out of line or a weird question, but do the applicants have any issues with the conditions as they're outlined, or is that a fair question to ask?
Yes, it is. Fair question. Thank you.
So we would prefer not to pay those 8 parking spaces. And we would prefer to make the adjustment to the, as Chapin said, to provide the vegetated edge as a condition of our, yeah, occupancy certification.
Oh, all right, noted. Any discussion from the commissioners on that? I think that's in line with what was being proposed and discussed. At this point in time, Chapin, are we good to solicit a motion?
Yes.
Is any of the commissioners ready to do so? Greg, could I put you on the spot perhaps?
I can give it a try. How's that?
That would be fantastic.
Commissioner Lobby moves, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommends City Council approve the freight boxcar conditional use permit amendment, PL 2024-014, located at 320 East 9th Street, along with the attached findings and conditions, and modifying the conditions of approval to say that the landscaping requirement will take effect upon the certificate of occupancy, and that regarding the 66 parking spaces, that the word paved be stricken from that condition.
Law seconds.
Do we need to do a roll call, Chapin?
Yes. Sorry, one second. All right, Commissioner Law,
Yes.
Commissioner Law,
Yes.
Commissioner Bauer,
Yes.
Commissioner Ducharme.
Yep.
And so did Mayor Green, so that just leaves alternate Commissioner Wardson.
I missed that last part, Chapin.
Are you looking
Alternate.
for me? I can't, it's hard to.
Sorry, alternate Commissioner Wardson, do you support the motion?
Yes, I vote yes.
Okay. Dennis, did I get it right? So, all right, motion passes.
Thank you much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good luck.
Thanks. And we'll let you know how the grand opening is.
Yes.
This is just the beginning.
But Chapin, is there official verbiage to close this portion of the hearing?
Yes. Yes, you just say the closing public hearing and note the time.
All right. At this point in time, I would like to close the public hearing on June 12th, 2024 at 6:43.
7:43.
6:37.
What time zone are you in,
Change
Scott?
it to 7. Where is he
7.
exactly?
Sorry, I'm traveling.
Right, Scott, I have on screen the remainder of the agenda. There are not any other action items, so we can talk about goal setting, taking a final public comment, and then adjourn, talking about our next meetings. In terms of goal setting, you know, obviously we have a lot of progress right now, so that's all good. The housing variety amendments will be at the next P and Z meeting in addition to the development agreement chapter, so both of those ordinance will be by this commission concurrently at the next meeting in public hearings. And we'll also talk about the comp plan progress. And there was one more, we're making some progress in several of the lofty goals for 2024. And then Scott, we could probably move on to opening up for any final public comment. Steve, if you have anything to say?
Yeah, this is the same thing with the city council and the HBC committee. And Laura needs to have public comments available. And Laura is not accessible to me unless the mayor is here. We need to somehow facilitate that. I can tell you. But the public comment things, I can understand why we want to discourage people from vomiting their objection to something further in the agenda at the beginning, directing them to put their comments where they're appropriate. As long as we continue to allow public comment when these issues are raised, which isn't always the case. But I think that at the end of the meeting, it should be more flexible, that the public comment should be allowed, unless it was I can't see why any kind of general public, whether it's something that's on the agenda, that should be more flexible. Thank you.
I'd like to agree with that. The reason I would is a lot of times public comment at the end of a meeting is because something is prompted, something in that meeting, that prompted a thought, public comment. So typically, I think the end of the meeting is not directed at things not on the agenda. It should be open.
Most part, okay. Scott, go ahead.
So I had a few thoughts on that as well. Like I like to have public comment. I like to solicit it and kind of hear what's going on in the community and have people step forward and speak to what's going on in the community and what's coming before the commission. I applaud that. I think having it at the front end of the meeting is much more useful, like going into the topic or the topics of the day that may or may not address, that's in the agenda, but it gives people food for thought as we move through the process and dealing with the business at hand. I'm finding that having public comment at the end, like the business has been done and it's being moved along or paused, or, like the decisions have been made in terms of recommendations, because we don't have any power. We're just making recommendations based on what's presented to us. And that I think that those persuading arguments would be better served by the public at the front end of our meetings instead of at the end. Those are my thoughts, at least.
I think from staff's perspective, just the one clarification is that legally, public comments that occur on an agenda item, if that agenda item is a public hearing item, after the public hearing has been closed at the end of the meeting, it can't be given consideration because that decision, that recommendation has already been made. Then now that can occur, at the beginning of a city council meeting, and that's the council's discretion how to take those comments. So when it's fine on other non-action item, non-public hearing, decisions or recommendations to the city council. But they can't be considered in terms of, because we can't reopen the public hearing at the very end of the meeting if we've already closed. So it's public hearing, a quasi-judicial application like we just had.
Chapin, I think that's a point well taken. It sounds to me like this may be something we want to bring up when Gabby's in attendance, and see if we can maybe make an adjustment.
Sure.
Okay. Let's see here. I guess at this point in time, I'd like to adjourn unless there's any other comments from the commissioners.
Just wants to touch base with the commissioners on the next two meetings, so. Your next meeting, at the end of this month, June 26th. That will be, as I mentioned, the public hearings on the two ordinances. And so. We've had a lot of discussion on those, so, I think that. Those public hearings, Zoom participation is fine. But obviously if, in person is preferred for these public hearings. And particularly if there are, members of the public who want to engage with the commissioners, sometimes it's easier for them to do that in person. Both of those will continue to be in hybrid mode. And then the next meeting, the first meeting in July, we have a conditional use permit for a bar and restaurant use at 715 Elm Street. That's essentially just reestablishment of a use that was previously already there, but it's been sitting, that use has not continued for the past few years, and so technically it requires a conditional use permit. So we have public hearings in the next two meetings.
And that's July 10th.
July 10th. Obviously, all those will require a quorum, so if anyone has any vacation plans, and they'll be out, for, any of those meetings, if you can communicate that in advance to me, that'd be great.
Sounds good. All right then. Yeah. Is that it? Chapin?
That's it. Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Thanks for running the meeting while you're traveling, Scott. Appreciate it.
Well, yeah, no worries. Sorry. it's a little
Nice
cryptic
job,
here.
Scott.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it. All right then, at this point in time, I would like to adjourn the meeting, and if somebody could give me the time, that would be great.
7:47.
Excellent. In that case, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.